Alright, what's up peoples? RALPHINATOR here, and today we will be reviewing Godzilla, Planet of the Monsters, a new Japanese anime film which recently debuted on Netflix, and I had the opportunity to watch it, and I'm going to give you some of my thoughts and feelings about the movie. So, quick plot summary. In the world of the film, sometime in the near future, humans leave the Earth and search for a new home after Godzilla and other giant monsters called kaiju have made the planet uninhabitable for humans. However, after decades of living in space and no luck finding a new habitable planet, they decide to return to Earth and take their chances with the King of the Monsters. When they return to Earth, they discover that 20,000 years have passed, and Earth, the planet they once knew, has become barely recognizable. So very interesting premise. Mild spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. I'll start with the negative first. One thing that I don't like about this film is Godzilla's kind of a bad guy here. He's actually kind of a jerk. He actually just sort of goes out of his way to attack humans, which, as you know, being familiar with the Godzilla movies, traditionally Godzilla doesn't really do that. I don't think very much at all. I mean, even in the first film, where Godzilla is a threat to humanity, he's more of a threat in the sense that he's sort of this wild, dangerous animal that is so powerful just by existing in space. He's just inherently destructive, kind of, but he's not willfully destructive, right? So that's something that kind of irks me a little bit, because I like, to be honest, I do like the whole idea of Godzilla being a hero, a heroic figure. I like the evolution, especially in the first series of movies, the original series of movies. You had sort of a character arc where Godzilla kind of, he's not so much a menace to humanity, but he actually becomes a hero over time. So I actually do like that character arc, and here in this movie, he's basically a villain throughout. There's no kind of redeeming quality about Godzilla. So I don't like that aspect. Now, since Godzilla is the main antagonist of the movie, he's basically the bad guy of the film. There's a lot of emphasis in the plot on trying to destroy Godzilla. And this is not a new idea. We've seen this before, right? But because he's such an overt villain, right? There's no redeeming quality about him. It feels like the movie kind of demands that the human protagonists succeed in killing Godzilla. And that's something that I disagree with. I don't think that's a good creative decision or a good direction to take Godzilla, because one of the things that I find appealing about Godzilla, and that is part of Godzilla's essence, is that Godzilla is ultimately a force of nature. And just like you can't stop an earthquake, right? You can't stop a tsunami or a hurricane. You can't stop Godzilla, right? And I think that's part of Godzilla's essence as a character, right? Godzilla often has been read as an allegory or a metaphor for the atomic bomb, but on a deeper level, I think what Godzilla really represents is a force of nature, right? Like the splitting of the atom, right? That's that in and of itself is a force of nature, right? A force that's so powerful it's beyond human understanding, right? So that's, I think, where Godzilla should live. I don't think human beings, and I'm not going to say, I mean, clearly the drive in the movie is to destroy Godzilla. I'm not going to say whether or not they succeed or what happens with that, but that's I don't really like that direction that they're taking Godzilla in. It seems like, again, another negative point about this movie is that it kind of is reminding me of Attack on Titan. It's a very kind of similar plot setup, right? Godzilla is basically a stand-in for the Titans, right? And the humans are trying to reclaim Earth from Godzilla. And even one of the main characters, right, is kind of similar to Eren in that he has a very personal grievance against Godzilla, and he has sort of this he displays this very intense hatred for Godzilla on behalf of humanity, right? Very similar to Eren in Attack on Titan. So if you haven't seen Attack on Titan, it's a pretty popular anime. It's basically it's kind of similar to this in that it's about giant monsters that eat people and terrify people, and the people have to kind of defeat the monsters. So it's very similar in that sense. And again, to the film's detriment, I just think there's so much great stuff in the source material for Godzilla. In the original movies, why are you borrowing elements from a altogether different intellectual property, a different IP, when within the Godzilla lore there's so much stuff that you can mine there for to make a movie. I don't know, I disagree with that creative decision to kind of you're basically turning Godzilla into Attack on Titan. Maybe the strategy there is that since Attack on Titan is so big and popular, it's one of the recently it's one of the biggest animes to penetrate Western culture. So I guess they're thinking that, hey, let's kind of take a page from that book. But again, I mean, Godzilla has been popular in the US for decades. So I mean, outside of Japan, Godzilla, the biggest fan base for Godzilla and Godzilla movies outside of Japan is the United States. So I mean, these movies have been popular for decades. I mean, Godzilla is an icon. You don't really need to borrow some new elements from some new IP. There's already stuff there that you can mine, for creative inspiration. Yeah, overall, I found the film to be kind of underwhelming. Again, you would think that a Godzilla anime would be a no-brainer. This is really the first Godzilla anime that has been produced ever. Which is really weird if you think about it. Anime is both anime and Godzilla are so linked with Japan, especially in the American psyche. You would think that there would have been at some point some kind of anime, some kind of legit Japanese anime version of Godzilla, but there hasn't been. So given that, this is kind of a disappointment, I feel like, in that sense. It doesn't really, again, this is not my Godzilla. This is not the Godzilla that I know from the original movies. On a more positive note, I will say that at least they're trying something different. They're trying something new. Obviously, setting it in the future, in the distant future. It does have that kind of After Earth feel. The film After Earth with Will Smith, where humans leave the Earth and then they come back and the planet is unrecognizable. Life has gone on without humans. So that's really interesting. That's a really interesting premise that it starts off with. They actually do bring in some elements from the source material of the original movies in the form of alien species. Humans are coexisting with alien species that they came into contact with as a result of the kaiju or the giant monster invasions of Earth, right? So, and this is an element that's completely taken from the original movies. Many of the original Godzilla movies, you had these plots where they would involve aliens, right? I mean, for a lot of Western audiences, that might sound outlandish, and that's part of the history of the Godzilla movies, that they're so out there and sci-fi, Japanese weirdness, right? You have this interspecies kind of coalition, right? Of there's the humans and then there's these two other alien species. This is the same reason that I had a problem with Pacific Rim, is that you're painting all the kaiju, right? Again, giant monsters for people who don't know. All the kaiju are bad, and then all the humans are good. And I hate that kind of dichotomy. It's very black and white. One element that I like about Godzilla is, again, a callback to Godzilla as a force of nature, is where one of the aliens is having a conversation with one of the human characters, and this alien basically says something to the effect of, look, our species has been traveling in space longer than humans have, and we've seen other civilizations get destroyed by giant monsters. So kaiju are not unique to Earth, right? Giant monsters exist on other planets with other advanced civilizations, right? And he talks about how these giant monsters arose because of the arrogance of the civilizations of those planets, right? Which is an echo of the human arrogance, right? That led to the mutation of Godzilla, right? Like this idea that humans can somehow surpass nature or are above nature, and it's this arrogance, this hubris that destroyed those civilizations. They were ultimately destroyed by these kaiju, by these giant monsters, and that is definitely part of the essence of Godzilla, right? Godzilla is this force of nature. You know, he is, you know, the splitting of the atom. He is the typhoon, the earthquake, the tsunami. Like he's an unstoppable force of nature, and it's, you know, Godzilla is not something to be really fought against. Is, you know, Godzilla is really supposed to be something that is really supposed to be respected or even revered. You know, and there's echoes of the Shinto religion, which is the native religion of Japan, where you have a very strong reverence for nature and a humility towards nature, right? It's very different from, you know, traditionally Western culture, right? Like you have this idea that humans are supposed to be dominant over nature, right? We're supposed to dominate other animals and dominate other living things and dominate the planet, right? You know, the overall plot of the movie, again, I would argue, kind of contradicts that. So it kind of undercuts, you know, I mean, that's a great line, but, you know, it's undercut by the basic plot of the movie, which is basically we have to kill Godzilla and, you know, humans have to sort of take back Earth, right? So overall, I would say this movie, it's kind of underwhelming. Again, another thing I want to point out, missed opportunity, because you could, I mean, Godzilla as an anime, there's so many opportunities. If you look back at the older films, part of the fun of watching those old, you know, old movies with the bad special effects, right, is, you know, watching the Godzilla fights. And this was such a missed opportunity to see Godzilla throw down with, you know, all these other, you know, monsters. You could have had a whole roster or a whole rogues gallery of these other supporting, you know, monsters. And, you know, I would love to see a Godzilla fight. You know, I mean, humans versus Godzilla, that's boring. I don't want to see that. I want to see Godzilla fight, you know, these other kaiju, and we don't get to see that because there's really no other kaiju in the film except really Godzilla. So, you know, again, I think this movie kind of doesn't really understand the source material, doesn't really understand what makes Godzilla awesome. And so, would I recommend it? I would say ultimately it's passable. Just watch the original Godzilla movies, which I think are superior. So that's my take on this movie. Let me know what you guys think. Are you guys fans of Godzilla or kaiju in general? Are you interested in seeing this? If you did see it already, what did you think? Let me know down in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. New videos about pop culture and movies coming soon, and thanks for watching. Hasta la vista and peace.